If you've ever picked your child up from daycare or grandma's house, you've heard some version of the same thing. They were an angel today. No problems at all. And then 30 seconds after you walk through the door, the meltdown starts. Something about this doesn't add up. Your child behaved perfectly for everyone else. But the moment they saw you, the person who loves them most, the person who has done the most for them, they completely fell apart. Most parents assume this means something is wrong, that they're doing something to trigger it, that their child doesn't respect them, that maybe they're too soft, too inconsistent, or that daycare somehow has the right approach and they don't. But here's what's actually happening. Your child cries more around you, not despite your relationship, but because of it. The meltdowns, the clinginess, the emotional intensity that appears the moment you walk in the room, that's not a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that something is deeply, powerfully right. Your child trusts you with feelings they wouldn't dare show anyone else. And the reason this happens, the reason your child's nervous system saves its biggest, most overwhelming emotions for you specifically, is rooted in how attachment actually works in the developing brain. A child's nervous system is not fully developed. They cannot regulate their own emotions the way adults can. They rely on a regulated, safe, predictable adult to help them process feelings that are simply too big for their young brain to handle alone. And when they find that adult, when they find the person whose presence signals safety at the deepest neurological level, that's where the feelings come out. Not because that person triggers distress, but because that person is the only container safe enough to hold it. Think about it this way. When you're going through something genuinely hard, grief, fear, humiliation, exhaustion, where do you fall apart? Not at work, not in front of acquaintances, not even in front of casual friends. You hold it together there because the environment isn't safe enough for that level of vulnerability. You fall apart at home, in front of the people you trust most, in the places that feel like the emotional equivalent of solid ground. Your child is doing exactly the same thing. You are their solid ground, and solid ground is where feelings finally get to land. Hi, I'm Helen Hoffman from the Connected Family, and in this video, we'll talk about why your child cries more around you than anyone else, what it actually means about your relationship, and how to respond in ways that deepen their security instead of accidentally shutting it down. Attachment research has identified something called the safe haven response. It's the instinct in every child to move toward their attachment figure, usually a parent, when they're frightened, overwhelmed, hurt, or distressed. The attachment figure isn't just someone the child loves. They're the person the child's nervous system has identified as the specific source of safety, comfort, and regulation. And here's the key thing that most parents don't understand about safe havens. They only work when the child reaches them. The feelings don't come out during the threat, they come out after. When the child has made it back to the safe place. This is why your child can hold it together at school or daycare for an entire day, and then completely unravel the moment they see your face. At school, they're in mild survival mode. Not frightened necessarily, but managing, adapting, containing. Their nervous system is doing its job, keeping them functional in an environment that is not their primary attachment base. The moment they see you, that containment releases, because you are the signal that safety has arrived. So the next time your child falls apart the moment you walk in the door, I want you to shift how you interpret that moment. Instead of thinking something is wrong, or I must have done something to cause this. Think my child held on until they reached me. They were waiting for me specifically, because I am their safe place. That reframe matters, not just for your own feelings, but because how you respond in that moment either confirms or begins to erode your child's sense that coming to you is safe. If you meet their meltdown with frustration, distance, or dismissal, their nervous system logs that information. Maybe next time I should keep holding on. Maybe safe haven isn't so safe. But if you meet it with presence and warmth, you confirm what they needed to know. You were right to save this for me. I can handle it. You're safe. Children have limited emotional capacity. They can only contain so much before something has to give. And because school and daycare environments require a certain level of behavioral compliance, emotional presentation management, and social performance, your child spends the entire day doing a kind of internal emotional labor that they're not even consciously aware of. They're not crying when they're frustrated at daycare, because the environment doesn't feel safe enough for that. They're not asking for a hug when they're scared, because the adults there, however kind, are not their attachment figures. So they manage, they contain, they get through the day. And then they see you, and the valve opens. Think of it like a pressure system. The pressure builds throughout the day, small frustrations, moments of fear, times they needed comfort and couldn't access it, social difficulties they pushed through, tiredness they kept at bay. By the time you arrive, the pressure inside is significant, and you are the release point. This is actually a sign of an incredibly healthy coping strategy. Not healthy in the sense that it's comfortable for you, but healthy in the sense that your child has correctly identified the safest possible environment for emotional release and is using it. The alternative would be a child who never releases, who contains indefinitely, who presents as perfectly fine everywhere, including with you. That child isn't managing better. That child has learned that emotional expression isn't safe anywhere. So from now on, when you pick up your child and the release happens almost immediately, try to adjust your expectations before you even walk through the door. Remind yourself that you may be walking into a release valve moment. Give yourself a few seconds to breathe, regulate yourself, and shift into receiving mode warm, present, unhurried, so that when the feelings come, you're ready to hold them rather than be caught off guard by them. This is the part that surprises most parents because it sounds almost too biological to be emotional, but it's both. When a child is separated from their attachment figure, their body produces cortisol, the stress hormone, not at traumatic levels, but at a low, sustained level that keeps their system in a mild state of alert. This is normal and adaptive. It's the nervous system doing its job, maintaining readiness in the absence of the primary safety signal. When you reappear, your child's cortisol levels drop. This drop happens because of your face, your voice, your smell, all the sensory cues that their nervous system has learned to associate with safety. And as that cortisol drops, the emotional material that was being held in place by the stress response starts to surface. The crying that happens when you arrive is partly neurochemical. Their body is literally processing the shift from mild alert to safety, and that processing looks like emotion coming through. It's a lot like the experience of holding tension in your muscles without realizing it until you finally sit down and rest, and then your body starts to ache. The tension was there the whole time. You just couldn't feel it while you were in movement. Rest is when the body processes what it was holding. That's what your presence does for your child's nervous system. Understanding this changes how you respond. Instead of seeing the crying as a behavior to manage, you can see it as a physiological process to support. Your child's body is doing exactly what it should do, moving from alert to safe. And the way you support that transition is by making the landing as soft as possible. Get down to their level. Slow your own breathing. Make eye contact. Use a calm, warm voice. Allow the transition to happen without rushing past it or trying to immediately solve it. One of the most common misinterpretations parents make about this pattern is assuming the child is doing it on purpose, that they know they can get away with it with you but not with others, that it's strategic, manipulative, a performance. It's not. Young children, especially under age 7 or 8, do not have the cognitive development to strategically perform emotional distress for an audience. What they're doing is fundamentally neurological. They're using your regulated nervous system to help regulate their own. This process is called co-regulation, and it's not a weakness or a coping failure. It's the biological design of the parent-child attachment system. A child's prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for emotional regulation, impulse control, and calm logical thinking, doesn't fully develop until the mid-20s. In early childhood, it barely exists, which means children literally cannot regulate their emotions alone the way adults can. They borrow regulation from their caregiver's nervous system. Your child is not falling apart in front of you because they're manipulating you. They're falling apart in front of you because you are the regulation resource. You are the external version of the brain system they don't have yet, and they're doing exactly what their biology designed them to do, seeking that resource when they need it most. So when your child is melting down in your presence, the most effective thing you can do is stay calm. Not because calm is the rule, but because your calm nervous system is literally the medicine. Your steady breathing, your soft voice, your unhurried presence, these things regulate their nervous system in a way that words and reasoning cannot. Before a child can hear you, they need to feel you. And feeling you means feeling your calm, your steadiness, your non-reactivity. If you find yourself escalating when they escalate, and every parent does, that's the moment to focus on yourself first. Take one slow breath, drop your shoulders, soften your voice. You don't have to have the right words. You just have to be the steady thing in the room. There's something specific about transitions that amplifies everything for children. The moment of moving from one environment to another, from school to home, from grandma's house to your car, from daycare pickup to the drive home, is neurologically intense for young children in ways that adults don't always appreciate. Transitions require the brain to rapidly shift its operating context. Different rules, different adults, different expectations, different sensory environments. For an adult, this is usually manageable. For a young child whose brain is still building the architecture for flexibility and adaptation, transitions are genuinely effortful. And the transition back to you, back to the primary attachment base, is the biggest one of all, because it involves the switch from managed emotional containment to full emotional availability. This is why the meltdown often happens not later in the evening, but right at the transition point, the moment of pickup, the car ride home, the first few minutes after returning. They're in the process of switching from contained mode to open mode, and that switch is when the emotion surfaces. What this means practically is that transition moments require extra connection, not less. Many parents instinctively try to get through the transition efficiently, load everyone in the car, get home quickly, get dinner started, get the routine going. But what their child actually needs in that moment is a pause, a moment of pure reconnection before the logistics of the day take over. So from now on, when you pick up your child, before you deal with bags, before you ask how their day was, before you start thinking about dinner stop, get down to their level. Make real eye contact. Say something simple. I'm so happy to see you. I missed you today. Give them a moment to make contact with you before the world rushes back in. That 30-second reconnection window changes the entire trajectory of what follows. It communicates to their nervous system that the safe base has been reached. And when the safe base has been reached, the transition can actually complete. This is perhaps the most important piece. Because everything we've talked about so far only continues to work if what your child experiences when they bring their feelings to you confirms that it was safe to do so. Children are constantly running an unconscious experiment. What happens when I show my real feelings to this person? And they're recording the results with extraordinary precision. Not consciously, but their nervous system is tracking it. Every time they come to you distressed and you meet them with warmth, presence, and patience, the data point logged is, this person can handle my feelings. This is safe. I can keep coming here. Every time they come to you distressed and you meet them with frustration, dismissal, or urgency to make the feeling stop, the data point logged is, this creates tension. I need to be careful about how much I show here. And slowly, that child starts to contain more before they reach you. They start to present a managed version of themselves rather than the raw version. And the crying more around you pattern, which was the sign of healthy attachment, begins to quietly diminish. Not because they're regulating better, but because they've learned that your reaction isn't reliable enough to risk the vulnerability. So your reaction in those moments is not a small thing. It is the thing that either sustains or gradually erodes your child's willingness to use you as a safe haven. And the response that sustains it is simpler than most parents think. It doesn't require perfect words or therapeutic technique. It just requires presence, moving toward instead of pulling away, staying physically and emotionally close while the feeling runs its course, letting the storm pass without trying to shut it down early. If your child cries and you're near them, stay near. If they want to be held, hold them. If they don't want to be touched, be close anyway without touching. What they need to feel is that you didn't leave, that the feeling didn't drive you away, that you were there at the beginning of the storm and still there when it passed. That experience, repeated hundreds of times, is what builds unshakable trust in your relationship. Here's the harder truth underneath all of this. The fact that your child cries more around you than anyone else is not a problem to solve. It's information about the depth of your relationship, and it will not last forever. Children who grow up in secure, emotionally available relationships gradually develop the internal regulation capacities that allow them to manage more emotion independently. As their prefrontal cortex develops, as they internalize thousands of co-regulation experiences with you, they need less of the raw external release. They start to have more of their own capacity to hold, process, and communicate their emotional experience without it spilling out the moment they reach safety. But that developmental progression, that healthy move toward increasing self-regulation, is built on the foundation of all those early experiences of being met. Every time you stayed present during the meltdown, every time you didn't rush past the tears, every time you were the safe landing, those experiences become internal architecture. They become the child's own regulatory capacity, built directly from yours. Parents who try to short-circuit this process, who push their children towards self-regulation before they've had enough co-regulation, often get compliance in the short term. The child stops crying around them too. But what they've built is not emotional resilience. It's emotional suppression. A child who has learned that feelings aren't safe anywhere, not even here, and who has adapted by simply not showing them. The crying around you is the sign that you haven't done that your child still trusts you with the real version of themselves. And that trust, messy, overwhelming, inconvenient as it sometimes is the most precious thing in your relationship. So the next time you walk in the door and the meltdown begins before you've even set down your bag, try to let yourself receive it differently, not as a problem landing on you after an already long day, but as evidence. Your child chose you. Out of everyone in their world, you are the one who gets the real feelings. That's not a burden. That's the whole point of what you're building together. And every time you meet those feelings with presence instead of distance, you're telling them something they will carry for the rest of their lives. You are safe to fall apart. And I will still be here when you come back together.